The Book of the Dead is your best window into the mind of ancient Egypt. It can help you understand what ancient Egyptian religion was all about. Figure out this book, and your grounding in Egyptology will be strong. But understanding the Egyptian Book of the Dead is harder than you think. Why? Because this text is a kaleidoscope. It's a collection of different genres rooted in an alien culture. Its origins stretch back 5,000 years and longer. You want it to tell you straightforwardly what secret wisdom the Egyptians possessed. But if you've ever tried reading the text, you'll see how hard this is. I have a master's degree in Egyptology from the University of Cambridge, and even I struggle to decode this beast. It's filled with dense references to a million obscure names and gods. Unpicking this book requires speculation and interpretation galore. So, let's build this out together. By the time this video is done, you will know all of the basics about the Book of the Dead. What it is, what it contains, when it dates from, and the history of its study. And we'll be discussing how this work can provide genuine value to people reading it in 2025. So, what is the Book of the Dead? In short, it is a collection of spells, hymns, and religious knowledge. These helped ancient Egyptians to navigate the dangers of the afterlife and to transform themselves into glorified, effective spirits after death. While the Book of the Dead became common in the New Kingdom, its roots stretch all the way back to the Pyramid Age. It is therefore arguably the crucial text for understanding ancient Egyptian religion. There's just one problem. There is no Book of the Dead. This is true in a few senses. Firstly, Books of the Dead is not what ancient Egyptians called these scrolls. It's actually what 19th century Egyptians called them. Literally, the books of dead people. Ancient Egyptians called these texts books of coming forth by day. Coming forth by day is a reference to one aspect of the ancient Egyptian conception of a soul, something called a bar. Bars are often depicted in art as human-headed birds. The bar is something like a person's identity or personality. It was believed to exit the body of the deceased at sunrise and come forth by day into the world. The bar would then return to the body before dark, and that's why mummification was so important, because a body had to be well preserved for its bar to recognize it. But there is also no Book of the Dead in the sense that there was no definitive version. Different versions included different hymns, different spells, different illustrations. No two Books of the Dead are the same. This teaches us a very valuable lesson about ancient Egyptian religion. It was highly diverse. Different towns and regions venerated different gods and had different myths. Different individuals would favor different spells, different artists, different religious motifs. This diversity can be obscured by the fact that many modern English translations of the Book of the Dead are actually compilations from numerous different papyri and from different periods of history. This is largely thanks to someone called Edward Naville, who in 1875 created a kind of master version of the Book of the Dead, complete with illustrations, and this still continues to be used today. So, there was no canonical Book of the Dead. Even so, the books are clearly highly related, with many of the same spells appearing in copy after copy. Now, before we delve into the wonderful theology of the book, let's quickly zoom out and have a look at the history of its study. I promise you, it's much more Indiana Jones than dusty scholarship. Let me introduce you to an extraordinary character. Ernest Alfred Wallis Budge, the most famous translator of the Book of the Dead. I am using Budge's translation of the Book of the Dead for this video. Now, there might be some keen-eyed Egyptologists among you, and you'll know that this version is in fact outdated. But never fear, I've been cross-referencing this with more up-to-date translations, so that accuracy is maintained throughout. So learn from my mistake. FYI, just because it's a Penguin Classics doesn't mean that it's the most up-to-date version. It could just be the cheapest version, as copyright is long out of date on this bad boy. Budge was an eccentric character, to put it mildly. He was one of the last of the generations of sort of gentleman antiquarians, and he fiercely resisted the professionalization of archaeology and Egyptology which started happening towards the end of his life. But we have Budge to thank for the magnificent Papyrus of Ani. This is the most beautiful and celebrated Book of the Dead we have, and is housed in the British Museum in London. Professional ethics were unknown to Budge. He was presented with the Papyrus of Ani, as well as other Books of the Dead and other artifacts, by grave robbers in Luxor in the year 1888. But before he could make off with the objects, they were seized by Egyptian antiquities police and placed under armed guard. Budge was not prepared to give up this priceless papyrus so lightly. He claims in his autobiography that he had a large meal cooked for the guards protecting the Papyrus of Ani. And this wasn't an act of charity, mind. but distraction. In the meantime, Budge had employed workmen and gardeners to dig a tunnel under the ground and up through the earthen floor into the house where they were keeping the artifacts. And they went out, took the papyrus, and brought them out back to Budge. This is how he ended up bringing it back to London, to the British Museum, where it still lives to this day. I just find this absolutely wild. Like, normally when people say that British people stole things from the British Museum, I always assume it was like taken through conquest or maybe purchased or dug up in another country and then the law of finders keepers applied, but this was literally thievery from a government storeroom. It's nuts. Anyway, how old, then, is the Book of the Dead? The earliest examples of spells being arranged in the same order as they would be found in the Book of the Dead comes from 1650 BC, during a period which archaeologists and Egyptologists sexily refer to as the Second Intermediate Period. This was a period of fragmented political power in Egypt. The strongest polities at the time included those of the Asiatic Hyksos invaders who built their forts and palaces in the swampy Nile Delta. However, Thebes, in the south of Egypt, aspired to restore its status as the country's political and cultural heart. It was, after all, the home of the pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom, as well as housing the growing cult centre of the god Amun at Karnak. It was here that the Egyptian Book of the Dead came together as part of a wider programme of cultural reform. This included the promotion of so-called rishi coffins, coffins covered with a feathered pattern, as well as the adoption of new styles of pottery. The Theban King Ahmose I reunited the country in 1570 BC. In doing so, he established the new kingdom of Egypt. It was during the 18th dynasty, the absolute pinnacle of Egyptian empire and international prestige, when Books of the Dead became commonplace for the aristocrats of Egypt, now fabulously wealthy from all the gold from Nubia and Asia. It would remain in use for 1,500 years, eventually fizzling out in the 1st century BC during the Ptolemaic period. So the Book of the Dead was primarily a product of the New Kingdom, the glittering age of Tutankhamun, Hatshepsut, and Ramesses the Great. But it had older roots, being based in part on the Middle Kingdom coffin texts and the Old Kingdom pyramid texts before that. All of these writings shared one fundamental purpose. This was the utter transformation of a deceased person into a divine and incorruptible being called an Akh. It is now time to unpick the Book of the Dead's fascinating theology. Akh means effective spirit, a dead person who could move around, interact with others, and receive and eat the offerings left to it by the living. They are also associated with the celestial gods, Horus and Ra. But Arks were not just mere people brought back to life. Instead, they were transformed, possessed with powerful magic. The image is one of dazzling, immortal beings who live in the stars and in the sun with Ra, who stand with him like human torches in his solar boat, raging against the demons who attacked the sun god each night as he passed through the underworld. Grant thou that I may come unto the heaven which is everlasting, and unto the mountain where dwell thy favoured ones. May I be joined unto those shining beings, holy and perfect, who are in the underworld, and may I come forth with them to behold thy beauties when thou shinest. However, simultaneous to their heavenly existence, they could also be found chilling out in the underworld, particularly in the Field of Reeds. This was the paradise of Osiris, the god of the dead, and in many ways it was just like home. It was teeming with watercourses and lush green vegetation, and you could sail around the place, tying up your boat at celestial lakes. The environment seemed a lot like the Nile Delta. The lifestyle like that of a pampered Egyptian aristocrat. Arks could chill out here and do some farming if they liked, but of course farming would be optional if you were buried with shabtis, little effigies of human beings who were supposed to be your servants in the afterlife. You could also go see dead relatives, go hunting for fowl, and also make love. I exist therein, I am strong therein, I become an Akh therein. I eat therein, I sow seed therein, I reap the harvest therein, I plough therein, I make love therein. Doing two types of ploughing, I see. O Ra in his egg, shining in his disk, rising from his horizon, floating on his sky, whose abomination is evil, raised on the supports of Shu, without equal among the gods, who gives the breath of flame of his mouth, who illuminates the two lands with his power of light. May you rescue the Osiris Ani from that god secret of forms. So Ra is one of the two main recurring gods in the Book of the Dead. The other, Osiris, is like his mirror image. While Ra is the glittering king of the heavens and day, Osiris is the lord of green earth and the shadows of the underworld. The dead person is identified with Osiris in these texts. So in the reading we just heard, it was Osiris Ani. If I had a Book of the Dead, it would be Osiris Matthew. This is because the mythical death of Osiris and his resurrection in the afterlife is archetypal. It provided the template for the journey on which all deceased people had to embark. Glory be to Osiris Un-Nefer, that great god within Abtu, King of eternity, Lord of everlastingness, who passeth through millions of years in his existence. Through thee the world waxeth green before the triumph of Neber-Cher. Thy body is of bright and shining metal, thy head is of azure blue, and the brilliance of the turquoise encircleth thee. The bond between Ra and Osiris is a major theological theme of the Book of the Dead. They may seem to be opposites. Sky and earth, night and day, today and yesterday. Yet every night, the sun god descends into the underworld at sunset. There, his boat is assailed by all sorts of demons and horrors of the night, like the gigantic chaos serpent Apep. Yet he always survives, and then meets with Osiris. Here, the two gods' souls merge. I am the divine soul which dwelleth in the divine twin gods. What then is this? It is Osiris when he goeth into Tatu, and findeth there the soul of Ra. There the one god embraceth the other. The fusing of the gods of life and death is the day's spiritual zenith. This mystical daily union is depicted in a masterpiece of Egyptian art from the tomb of Queen Nefertari. Look, I have one right here. You see this? You see that? I got it. So essentially, if you look here, here is the mummiform body of Osiris. You see how it's bandaged up like a mummy? But here, with the solar disk on the head, it's the horned head of Ra, who's often depicted as a ram. So this is Ra and Osiris fused together. Ra head, Osiris body. Now you know. This union revivifies the world, renews the cosmic order, until the two gods separate and Ra emerges again from the horizon in the blood-orange hues of sunrise. And the arcs join in with this daily procession through sky and earth, doing their bit to help shore up the cosmic order. While the idea of the union of a sky god, initially Horus and then later Ra, with Osiris has existed in ancient Egypt since the Old Kingdom, there is also some much newer material in the Book of the Dead. Most notable is the judgment scenes. This is no doubt the best known and best loved part of these books. The most iconic image of this is the weighing of the heart. The deceased, confronted by a tribune of gods, must prove that they have lived an ethical life. Their heart is weighed on a set of scales, with the feather of Ma'at, the Egyptian conception of virtue and order, on the other. This chiefly takes the form of a negative confession. The dead must claim that they have not partaken in certain behaviours and that they are in fact pure. These negative confessions include: I have not slain man or woman. I have not uttered falsehood. I have not defiled the wife of a man. I have made no man to weep. I have not judged hastily. Fairly familiar stuff. Though in some cases it is clear that we're dealing with quite different moral priorities. Take as an example this plea to Osiris from the 18th dynasty Papyrus of Nu. Nu promises that I have not caught fish with bait made of fish of their kind. Fish cannibalism. It's pretty messed up, to be fair. And for more fish cannibalism content, please like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you'll get something like this. I have given bread to the hungry man, and water to the thirsty man, and apparel to the naked man, and a boat to the shipwrecked mariner. Remind you of anyone? This too is from the Papyrus of Nu, which dates from around 1.5 millennia before Christ, even if it is echoing him, or he's echoing it. But anyway, you definitely want to pass the Judgment of the Dead, because the crocodile demon Ammit is waiting to strike. Ammit has the face of a crocodile, the mane and front legs of a lion, and the rear legs of a hippo. Her job is to eat the heart of sinners. To fail the judgment, to have your heart devoured, is a fate worse than annihilation. You become permanently lost in the duat, the Egyptian underworld. And it isn't all a lush field of reeds where you and your pal Osiris thresh barley. Oh no, 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 no. This is a Lovecraftian labyrinth of fire and darkness and watery pits teeming with eyes. Horrible demons and dog-faced gatekeepers stalk the land, relishing the slaughtering and dismembering of the dead. O Lord of the great temple, sovereign of the gods, may you rescue the Osiris Ani from that god whose face is that of a dog, whose eyebrows are human, who lives on sacrifices. He is the keeper of the bend of the lake of fire, consuming corpses with seizing chests, inflicting injuries without being seen. What does it mean? His name is Swallower of Millions, and he exists in the lake of Wennet. As for the lake of fire, it is the one which is in Nareth at the circuit, and anyone who treads on it should guard against falling to the slaughter. Now, the devils of the underworld get far weirder than even this. Have you heard of Medjed? He is a flat, ghost-looking boy. He allegedly goes around shooting rays of light from his eye, but who himself is unseen. And can you take a guess now where his blockish good looks have earned him a bit of a cult following? Take a guess. Of course it's Japan. Apparently he appears in a few different anime shows and manga. So kawaii. And this is just a tiny sample of the outrageous demons and gods lurking in the waters of the duat. The message is clear. Egyptians must invest in being ethical persons and in learning the right magic to avoid being chased by a spooky sheep with legs forever in the underworld. Finally, why should we care about the Book of the Dead in 2025? Is there value in this seemingly arcane knowledge for a modern person? I think one of its potentially enriching perspectives centers on the widespread immanence of the divine in the book. By this I mean the Egyptian belief of the presence of the supernatural in pretty much everything. In the West, we are used to having a pretty abstract idea of God. Granted, in Christianity, Jesus gives us a more concrete connection. But God the Father, he's somewhere up there, man, or maybe somewhere deep in here, but either way, he's quite hard to find. In the Book of the Dead, it's the exact opposite. The divine is literally bursting out of everything you see. Egyptians believed the sun and the moon were the eyes of the god Ra. Plants, animals, inanimate objects, human beings, landscape features, literally every shape on the planet belies some aspect or the actual presence of one or more gods. Now, it's easy to be contemptuous of this idea, and many early scholars of ancient Egypt certainly were. You can see it as credulity and superstition. You could even parody an ancient Egyptian threshing some grain and suddenly spotting a seed which looked vaguely like a falcon and just collapsing into religious ecstasies. But more charitably, if you detected the numinous in everything, presumably everything would matter more. If every sideward glance from a cow or flash of Nile tilapia in the water contained some essence of the beyond, I think life might well be more interesting. For the light of Ra falls upon all things, and it's not just humans who praise the god. The souls of the cities of Pe and Nekhen exalt thee, the apes of dawn adore thee, and all beasts and cattle praise thee of one accord. For me at least, I think this deep reverence and appreciation of the world as it is something we could probably benefit from sharing in. And the immanence of the divine is not confined to the world around us, but is something that human beings can themselves participate in. For example, today, in Britain, 2025, unfortunately, I don't think many people care about geese. But in ancient Egypt, when geese would come pouring into Africa on their migration down from the north, people pondered the significance. They weren't aware that these birds were migrating from Europe. Instead, they theorized that there must be a northern exit of the duat somewhere out in the Mediterranean. They came to believe that these geese were not just birds, but archs, the glorified dead come to visit the living. Therefore, some Egyptians expressed the desire to be transformed into a goose, and as early as the pyramid text, I fly as a hawk, I cackle as a goose. In ancient Egypt, you were not always destined to be a person. In death, you could be transformed. There is no hard line between animal, human, and God, and this has interesting philosophical implications. If you could transform into an animal or a deity, would that give you more or less respect for those things? And you could become a god with the right magic. I have divided the heavens, I have cleft the horizon, I have traversed the earth, following upon his footsteps. The mighty ark taketh possession of me, and carrieth me away because, behold, I am provided with his magical words for millions of years. I eat with my mouth, I crush my food with my jawbones. Behold, I am the god who is lord of the duat. The cynic might look at this and smirk. A million spells and amulets, mummies and tombs, and still the Egyptians died just like everyone else. But death was not the end for ancient Egyptians, just the start of a much larger and weirder life. You stand at the fore of the dual flagpole shrines as Min. You stand at the fore of those of Blackland as the Apis. You stand at the fore of Spread Lake as Sokar. Ho, Pepi, elder when awake and great when asleep. Become sweet, sweet one. Raise yourself, Pepi. You have not died. These words from the pyramid texts epitomize Egyptians' defiant optimism about life after death. Faced with the great unknown, they chose to believe that life will go on. The corpse lies stiff, but the mourners cry out in hope, raise yourself. You have not died. Of course, today we doubt the reality of the duat. I know I'll be surprised if when I die I wake up to a vision of Amit and Anubis. I'll be glad I studied Egyptology then, I can tell you that for free. But with their visions of souls daily flying through the glittering sunlight, of Ra and Osiris mingling underground, the ancient Egyptians thoroughly incorporated the worlds of the living and the dead. In this, they celebrated a deep truth. That is, there can be no life without death, and there can be no death without life. The alternative to the cycle of living and dying is nothingness. But through its rich poetry and fabulous illustrations, the Book of the Dead inarguably captures one element of the dance between life and death. It is beautiful. In this video, we discussed the history of the Book of the Dead, its early scholarship, and its content. We also discussed what we might learn from this classic text in 2025. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and please like and comment on the video if you did, and also please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot. Thank you so much for watching.